Before the great changes of 19th century, the Arastas and Bedestens of the Ottoman Empire were among the most important spaces in urban life. They were not simply markets where people bought and sold goods, they were the center of production, trade, and social order, as well as daily interaction. In these places, economic life was shaped by guild system, also called the Lonka system, which organized craftsmen and merchants according to strict professional rules. Every trade had its own traditions, standards, and responsibilities, and the guilds helped maintain both quality and fairness in the marketplace. Visually, these places were also very distinctive. Arastas often looked like a long, narrow market streets lined with small shops under wooden roofs or covered walkways, while Bedestens were more enclosed and monumental, built with thick stone walls, domes, arches, and vaulted ceilings. They stood at the heart of the city and gave a strong impression of order, permanence, and commercial importance. Production in these traditional spaces was based on the master-apprentice relationship. A young apprentice would learn a craft slowly under guidance of an experienced master, not only gaining technical skill but also absorbing discipline, ethics, and professional values. Goods were made carefully rather than quickly, and success was measured by quality instead of quantity. Before a product could be sold, it had met gold standards. In this way, the market became a place of trust, where customers believed the value of what they were buying. At the same time, these markets were organized spaces where workshops, shops, and trade were closely connected. Production, sale, and regulation often existed side by side in the same environment, making Arastas and Bedestens not only commercial areas, but also carefully structured urban spaces. This system created a stable but highly controlled economy. Because goods were produced by hand and under close supervision, they were often expensive. Yet their high price reflected their quantity, durability, and craftsmanship. For many years, the model worked well within the Ottoman world because it supported local production and protected the livelihood of artisans. The Arastas and Bedestens therefore represented more than commerce. They symbolized a way of life, built on local identities, skilled labor, and more of responsibility. In architectural and urban terms, these spaces also had a deep meaning. They were often built from stones, designed to last, and located at the heart of the city. They connected neighborhoods, people, and professions. They were places where business, tradition, and community came together. But this well-organized world, which had developed over centuries, would soon face a major challenge from outside. The rise of industrial production in Europe would begin to shake the foundation of the traditional systems, and it changed the future of Ottoman trade forever.
If the Industrial Revolution created the pressure, the 1838 Treaty of Balta Liman turned that pressure into a serious crisis for the Ottoman guild system. During this period, industrial powers such as Britain and to a lesser extent France, Austria, and Germany were expanding their influence through trade and manufacturing. The treaty became a major turning point because it opened Ottoman markets more widely to foreign merchants and weakened the protections that had supported local producers. After the agreement, imported goods became even more competitive, and foreign traders gained clear advantages over Ottoman artisans. One of the most harmful effects of the treaty was the unequal burden it created between local and foreign sellers. While European merchants, especially the British, benefited from favorable trading conditions, Ottoman guild members still faced internal customs duties and other restrictions. This meant that local craftsmen were competing under heavier obligations, while foreign producers could sell goods more cheaply and more easily. As a result, competition became deeply unfair. The effects were serious. European factories' goods, especially textiles and manufactured items coming from Britain and other industrialized Western countries, were already cheaper because they were produced on a large scale. Once these goods entered Ottoman markets more freely, local artisans found it much harder to survive. The Arastas, once active centers of local production and trade, began to lose customers to imported products. The Bedestens, which had long been seen as secure and valuable commercial spaces, also started to decline. At the same time, one of the key privileges of the guild system, known as gerik, began to lose its power. Gedik was the regulated right to open and run a shop in certain area, and it helped preserve order within the guild system. But as freer trade spread in the 19th century under the pressure of European commercial expansion, this protection was gradually weakened. The traditional rules of the guilds could no longer resist the growing force of the global market. This shows that the decline of the Arastas and Bedestans was not caused by a single event. It came from industrial competition combined with political and economic decisions that favored foreign trade over local production. The Treaty of Baltaliman did not simply change trade policy, it accelerated the collapse of an older economic order and made it much harder to traditional Ottoman market spaces to survive.
The 1838 Treaty of Baltaliman significantly struck the Ottoman economy that was already weakening. Seeking the support of the British Empire against the rebellion of the governor of Egypt, Sultan Mahmud II felt compelled to concede to this agreement. Consequently, British merchants were granted lower custom duties and achieved tax parity with local artisans and traders. However, in practice, the foreign entities were provided distinct advantages over their domestic counterparts. Furthermore, the treaty abolished the monopoly system, which was called Hciv, thereby stripping the Ottoman states of its control over the trade of strategic commodities. As a result of these provisions, the Ottoman Empire evolved into an open market for the West. Mass-produced, inexpensive European, particularly British goods, began to dominate the Ottoman domestic market. Local producers, who were unable to compete with the low cost of imports and burdened by the traditional constraints, were forced to cease operations. This led to the gradual decline of Arastas and Bedestans, which had once served as the primary centers of the production and commerce. This new economic framework, predicated on the principle of free trade, also brought an end to the Gedik system, a traditional mechanism that regulated the right to open new shops and maintain professional monopolies. While its dissolution theoretically granted to the local population the freedom to engage in commerce without restriction, the overwhelming competitive pressure from foreign merchants rendered such endeavors practically unfeasible. Ultimately, the Treaty of Baltaliman accelerated the functional obsolescence of guild system and precipitated the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire's traditional market structures, Arastas and Bedestan.
As the sun climbed over the stone streets of the Ottoman city, the Arastas and Bedestans beat not just the commercial hubs, but as the rhythmic heart of the moral order. Here, profit was never just about the coins in the coffer, it was world-anchored in craftsmanship, ethics, local control, and social responsibility. The soul of these marketplaces was defined by limits, strict boundaries on who could open a shop, quotas on production, and share the code for how trade was conducted. These limits were never viewed as weaknesses. They were the armor of a spiritual and social harmony. However, a different wind began to blow from the horizon. The modern industrial economy arrived with a starkly different creed. It championed mass production, unlimited growth, the rapid circulation of goods, and open competition. In this new era, the goal shifted from preserving local balance and quality to expanding output and slashing costs. Consequently, the traditional Ottoman production spaces began to look like relics of a bygone age. They faced a tragic paradox: they could not transform to meet the modern world without abandoning the very foundations upon which they were built. Therefore, the decline of the Arastas and Bedestans is not merely a clinical report of technological backwardness. It is the epic story of a clash between two different philosophies of economy and space. On one side stood the traditional stone-built markets, rooted in history, discipline, and the strength of the community. On the other stood the burgeoning industrial world, a landscape of factories, concrete expansion, and the frantic pulse of global trade. One valued continuity, the other valued acceleration. As this new world expanded, the old markets gradually lost more than just their market share. They lost their symbolic throne in society. Spaces, once vibrating with the sounds of labor and human exchange, began to grow quiet. The transformation was as physical as it was cultural. A migration from local workshops to industrial systems, from regulated urban centers to sprawling commercial networks, and from the soul of handmade quality to the accessibility of mass production. Ultimately, the question of why these traditional production spaces lost their function has no simple answer. They faded because they couldn't outpace industrial machinery, because foreign goods flooded the gates, and because political mandates, like the Treaty of Baltaliman, stripped away their local protection. But above all, they declined because the world around them had changed its heart. In the long shadow of industrial modernity, the Arastas and Bedestans fell silent, leaving behind the memory of a different kind of economy and a different kind of city.